what is your opinion on the current day board and train program? Right. I feel like the board and train program has been something it's been around since I've been training dogs, and I've seen it do so much of this, right? Of like it could be unbelievably beneficial in some cases, and some of our best successes we've ever had have been in board and trains. But some of the biggest issues that I see people face are with dogs that are in their care for board and trains. What is your opinion just on the current board and train climate?
When you say like the big issues that people face, you mean like as the business owner, like some of the stresses that come into their business have to do with the board and train program?
All of the above, right? So whether it's expectation setting and the dog goes home and we know a board and train doesn't fix problems and that owners are still going to see issues until they do some follow-up classes, whether it's health-related things that happen when the dog is in their care, whether it's just the client can't handle the emotions of being detached for that long and they run into issues from that. Like I just feel like there's so many different problems that can arise within a board and train program. I'm just interested to hear your opinion on it as a whole and like the risk reward of that versus one-on-ones, which there's not quite, I mean, obviously you have the client either doing the work or not doing the work, but it's the same with the board and train, in my opinion. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I think, obviously there's pros and cons to everything. And I work with trainers that, I think I have a client right now I have two clients right now who only do board and trains.
Yeah.
They don't offer anything else. Obviously there's one-on-one sessions as follow-up to the board and train, but like every dog starts in a board and train. I also have clients, one currently comes to mind that I'm working with right now also, who only does one-on-one sessions, does not do board and trains, does not want to do board and trains. And there are pros and cons. I think, again, like if your goal is to scale your business ultimately and grow and bring on employees, I think board and trains have a lot of advantages there. So I'll just put that out there from a business standpoint, from like a scalability standpoint. I think board and trains have a lot of advantages. From a just what's best for the client standpoint. Again, like I like board and train programs. I think there is a lot of good we can do. I think we can make a lot of progress in board and trains that can sometimes be difficult to make in one-on-one sessions. And I think it really kind of boils down to how you're structuring it. Again, I think that yes, like expectation setting is important. And like how you're selling the program, like what are you selling ultimately? What kind of concept are you selling this person that they're going to get? Because there are so many different ways you can structure it as far as like how you run your board and train, how much follow-up you're doing, how much communication with the client's happening while the dog is in your care, so on and so forth. Whereas like obviously private lessons, like there's significantly reduced liabilities with private lessons. Like at the end of the day, way less liability with private lessons. You don't have dogs in your care. I mean, even your insurance will be less if you're only doing private lessons, right? Because of just reduced liability. But sometimes doing just private lessons can be frustrating, because you are a little bit more beholden to the client's commitment and skill level. So I think, I guess the short answer is I don't have like really strong feelings about it. Like I hope that's not like a disappointing answer for you. Like I don't have super strong feelings about it. What I try and encourage for a lot of the trainers that I work with is we want to look at like their lifestyle and like what they need from their business and what kind of programs are going to work well for what they want their business to be doing for them and how they want to live their life. And sometimes that means adding more options. Sometimes that means taking away options that aren't really serving them well. And so, again, I know trainers that are very successful doing nothing but board and trains. I know trainers that are very successful doing nothing but private lessons. And I know trainers that are very successful doing combinations of both. Personally, I like, and I think it benefits most people to have some tiers of service available, right? Because board and train can be a sort of high cost of entry for a client. And so I think if you're going to do board and trains, again, if you're just a solo operation, maybe no big deal. But once you have employees or a facility and you have more expenditures that are not going to fluctuate with your revenue as much, meaning like your mortgage is the same every month, regardless of how many clients you have coming in, versus if you're a trainer who just operates out of your home and does private lessons, like your expenditures are like your gas and like training supplies. And if you're doing less training, those expenditures also are less, right? And so once you have a larger business, right, employees who you want to make sure that like they're getting paid enough every week, even if you're slow, having multiple offerings at different price points helps to sort of smooth out the equity curve, so to speak. It's kind of like, if you were to set up a retirement account with an advisor or just go on like Vanguard and set up like a target retirement account, they're going to put like some of your money in like US equities, some of them in overseas equities, some of them in bonds and things like that. And like bonds aren't going to have the same return rate as like your equity positions, your stock positions. But when your stocks drop a lot, like your bonds won't, right? And that's the idea, is like it's there to smooth out the equity curve. And you're going to be like, you might sacrifice a little bit, but it's going to be less of a roller coaster for you.
Yeah.
So I think that's sort of an important thing, is to have those options for people, where then as a business owner, you can help direct them. Sometimes you get a client where you're like, oh man, if I put this dog in board and train, this person's going to be a huge pain in my ass. And like that happens. Yeah. Like you just know that like that's not probably a good fit. Mm-hmm. And other people where you're like, man, if I try and do private lessons with this person, like we're going to get nowhere. Like if they want a realistic shot at success, like I've got to get this dog into a board and train.
Yeah.
And so again, just lots of pros and cons to both.
Yeah, I think where that question kind of stemmed from is, obviously over the course of the last year or 2 years, we've been seeing so much pop up as far as like you were saying, like horrible things happening within companies, right? Mm-hmm. And in addition to just horrible things happening within companies and just sheer like neglect, abuse, things like that, I think that there's a lot of little things that we'll see pop up from time to time of like, a good trainer that, has no ill intentions on dogs and, whatever. When the dog is there, the dog develops a skin issue to something or this or that, right? And, no matter what, right? Like obviously 9 out of 10 times, like you've experienced situations like that. I've experienced situations like that. 9 out of 10 times, if you have a good relationship with your client, it's not going to be a big deal. You talk to them about it, you keep the communication open. But in the end of the day, right, you're going to run into people that are just unreasonable with those types of things, right? And then you get into 99% of the things you see that get reposted on social media and trainers' reputations getting ruined and stuff like that comes down to things that typically, at least from my viewpoint, are happening within board and train programs. And I see so many people.
100%. Yeah. Definitely like some of the bigger stressors that we would have as far as like unhappy clients, it comes out of board train. And that's for a variety of reasons. I mean, some of it is things are happening with their dog that's outside of their sight. And so there's that little bit of like trust of like what's really happening behind the scenes there. So I think there's 2 things I want to kind of say about that. Because those issues should be really few and far between.
Of course.
And again, board and train can bring in a lot of revenue and be a very scalable program to like, you can have trainers come in and just assist with pieces of the board and train initially, and then gradually take on more and more responsibility with it. And that's hard to do with private lessons. Mm-hmm. So one is like, you want to have as much communication and transparency with the owners as possible. Yeah. You notice something going on with the dog, you want to make the owners aware of that as soon as possible. You should be regularly like checking over the dogs, looking for, again, like look at the paws. Are they licking their paws a lot when they're in their kennels? Yeah. Are you getting sore spots on the neck from the training collars? Like you want to be super aware of that stuff, and you want to be transparent, and you want to bring the owners in on the dialogue with it. You don't want to try and resolve it on your own and like, whatever, right? If you notice the dog's not eating a lot, like tell the owners. Ask the owner if they have a preference of how you would handle that. Yeah. Do they want to try to bring it? Some owners would be like, I've got this, sometimes I put chicken broth on top of their food. I'll drop some off for you, or, whatever. Right. Mm-hmm. And then they don't come in and go like, oh my God, my dog lost weight. What's going on? Because they know that you were aware of that problem and you were trying to resolve it, and you were bringing them in on the resolution, and they were part of that decision-making, right? It's a lot harder for them to be upset when like, they were part of the decision-making process of how we handled these things. Yeah. But the other thing is, at the end of the day, one thing that everybody sort of behaves the same way with is money. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons that you get these big, unhappy customer things with board and trains is because it's the highest price point ticket, right? Yeah. So when somebody drops $4,000 on training and their dog gets a little sore spot on their neck, they get really pissed off versus if they dropped like $600 on training, right? Mm-hmm. And again, if you're running your business well, these issues should be really few and far between. Mm-hmm. And then when they do, and you get that customer and they're just over the moon upset, like literally just give them their money.
Yeah.
Like offer them half their money back, offer them all their money back. Yeah. At the end of the year, like you won't even remember that bit of money if you're running your business well. Again, and running your business well, again, you have to be making enough money. Like you have to have a cushion in the bank. You have to be able to absorb these things. It's the cost of doing business. Right. And it shouldn't be happening. If this is happening 10 times in a year, then like you've got issues in your facility that you need to address. You know what I mean? But if it happens once a year or once every other year, which is like probably realistically where it should be for most people, and every now and then you have to give somebody like $2,000 back, like you refund half their board and trip. Like, trust me, those people that are really upset, they become a lot less upset when you give them some money. Like it's really sad to say it, but money is emotional for people. Money is, there's a whole psychology of money is a thing, right? Money is emotional for people. And that's something I learned from my mom. My mom's an entrepreneur as well. And you know, she'll fire a client like that if they're causing her a lot of stress. She'll eat the loss and just get rid of the client because it's just not worth it at the end of the day. And once you give somebody their money back, like they don't leave that negative review. They don't blast you on social media. They don't do that stuff. You know, like I'm not advocating like paying somebody off. Like obviously if you like legitimately effed up, like that's on you. But some of these things just happen, right? Like you get like for instance, dogs losing weight in board and train. Like it happens all the time. Half of it's because they're getting more activity, and half of those dogs were overweight to start with. You know what I mean? But the owner gets upset because their dog lost 5 pounds in your board and train. But you're like, yeah, but like they're eating less because we're managing their food intake because we're feeding them during training. They're exercising a heck of a lot more. And for a lot of dogs, when they come in for those first few days of any kind of boarding, a lot of dogs don't eat as much for the first 2-3 days. And that stuff can just happen. But again, like, you know, you shouldn't really that frequently be having like big upsets with customers. Like it just shouldn't happen. And if it is happening frequently, then we have to dig into that and say, what systems do we need to put in place to prevent these things from happening? So, you know, but to me, it's a trade-off. Like, there are bigger stressors with board and train, but there's also bigger potential payoffs with board and train as well.
No, that makes a ton of sense. So looking at, right. So if, you know, because again, like you mentioned, right, like weight loss, licking paws is another big one. And I think a lot of people in board and train see with dogs. They develop
huge, you get those
spots and irritation,
edema, whatever it's called.
So what sorts of things when you were operating, because like you would do a decent amount of board and trains, obviously, what sorts of things would you put in place to try to reduce the chances of all those things happening?
So again, the biggest thing is client communication. Right. Like if a dog didn't eat a lot its first 2-3 days, like we're going to tell that to the client. Like we're just going to let them know, and we're going to let them know it's normal, and we're going to let them know, you know, exactly what we're doing about it and how we're handling it. We're just going to keep them in the loop with what's going on with their dog. So that's a huge thing, right? Like I think that's kind of the biggest one is just open client communication. Don't try to like hide these things and fix it and then hope that it's better when the client picks up. You want the client to be prepared. And this comes down to everything with your board and train. Like, let's say, for instance, you have a dog, you're doing a 3-week board and train. That's a really common length of time, maybe 4-week. And you know that like the dog's weak point is like getting into a down. Like, you know that sometimes you have to give that extra little bit of leash guidance. It doesn't just always go verbally every single time. Right. Well, like if you know that, then like, tell the owner that before they come in for their lesson. Like let them know that like that's your dog's weakness, so that when you do the lesson and you say down and the dog doesn't do it, the owner's like, oh yeah, it's exactly what you said was going to happen. Like, you know my dog really well. You know, instead of like the owner's expecting everything to be like this, and then there are some things that just aren't quite like, and so kind of same thing. Like, you know, if you see that little sore spot, the dog's licking their paws, like just say something to the owner when you're checking in with them. That's kind of the biggest thing. Obviously, you want to be running an environment where, like, if every dog that's coming into your kennel is like getting those lick hot spots, then like there's probably like it shouldn't be that common. Like it happens a lot, but it shouldn't be like every single dog. You know, the weight loss should be negligible if dogs are losing weight. Like it should not be that noticeable for most dogs unless you're putting them on a scale and you see that like they lost X, Y, and Z, but it shouldn't be like a visible weight loss in most cases, unless that dog was obese and the owner was free feeding and things like that, in which case the weight loss is a good thing. sore spots on the dog's neck from training collars, right? Like, are you leaving your collars on too much when the dogs are in their kennels? Are you checking their necks regularly for those things? Because if you see the sore spot and it's there and the owner knows you're aware of it, the owner knows you're taking steps to mitigate it, then when they come in for their lesson and they see the sore spot, they're not shocked by it. You don't want there to be any surprises for the owner when they pick their dog up. You know what I mean? Like, they're picking their dog up there. It should be like a happy moment. They should know exactly what they're walking into and what to expect. So I think that's kind of the big thing. And again, if you're like bogging yourself down with so many dogs that it's like a factory, like dog after dog after dog, that you're not able to take the time to like give the dog a once over and make sure that, it's happy and healthy and everything else, then, because we see it even like, we do a lot of aggression work. And we would see it a lot with muzzles, like on the bridge of the nose, And again, we just tell the owners, like, hey, like, got these little sore spots doing, like, we're trying to use the muzzle minimally because of that. We're also wrapping it with some athletic tape to try and add some padding to it. We just want to make you aware. We're also going to put a little bit of Vaseline on it. Hopefully that helps it heal up a little bit. But, obviously the muzzle is sort of a necessary evil right now. We just don't want you to be like alarmed if you see that little bit of a scab on your dog's nose. That's what it's from. But if the owner comes in for their lesson and they didn't know that was there, then they see it, they go, what happened to his nose? And now they have this negative emotion right off the bat. And now you have to kind of come back from that. You know what I mean?
I remember
So clear expectations, clear transparency. That's really the name of the game.
No, I would totally agree with that. And that's how we've mitigated, like, obviously anybody, if you've been doing this long enough, you've experienced one of many of those issues. You know what I mean? But somehow over the course of 8 years or so, knock on wood, right, we've yet to run into a situation where it's become a serious problem because we keep the communication open with people.